Everyone, my name is Joe. My pronouns are he and him. I'm preaching to you live from my office here at church today. And as it turns out, our Filipino church neighbors are taking full advantage of our absence to fill our sanctuary with music today. I'm not sure if this is a regular thing or when we're gone, or I don't know what happens when I'm not in the building. But anyway, so if you're hearing any background music while I'm playing or I'm preaching, that's what's going on. I didn't choose my own soundtrack, but it will be good. Share my screen here. Acts chapter 4 is an amazing snapshot of the first church of Jesus Christ. While Jesus was alive, they were followers, disciples of their rabbi, in a familiar teacher-learner cohort. When Jesus was killed, they were fugitives, scattered and afraid. When Jesus returned, when they were finally convinced that he really was alive, they were more or less fans, groupies flocking to wherever he was rumored to be heading next. And when Jesus left them for good, they became something entirely different, a community. There were moments where they had this kind of church as we do it, worship and prayers and preaching, but mostly they were just figuring out how to live together, how to share life as a new kind of community. And for reasons unknown, they took it to the extreme. The community of believers was of one mind and one heart. None of them claimed anything as their own. Rather, everything was held in common. The apostles continued to testify with great power to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and they were all given great respect, nor was anyone needy among them. For those who owned property or houses would sell them and give the money to the apostles. It was then distributed to any members who might be in need. It's amazing how many biblical litericists find ways to not take this one literally. And even the progressives among us find this one a tad unbelievable. Sell everything and share it with anyone in need. Their generosity is admirable, but this is not a sustainable model. It's like a reverse pyramid scheme. Give us all your assets and you too can lower your standard of living. Yet, for a time, they ended poverty in their community. They had food security, enough for all. Who knows how long it lasted? And it's not as though this model was copied elsewhere as Christianity spread across the known world. I'm not, for the record, endorsing their methods either, but I admire their courage, commitment, and creativity. They saw a need, they cared about each other, and they took action. That's what I'd like to see our church do with what we've been learning about food security. Relax. I'm not asking anyone to sell their property and give the proceeds to the church for distribution. That's a bit too culty, even for an idealist like me. What I'm wondering is if we can take steps towards making food security a central part of our calling and identity as a church. That's where the first Christ followers started. As people of faith, we care that people have enough to eat. That was foundational. We feed hungry people. That's who they were. Now, I'm glad to acknowledge that we already do lots of that in lots of ways, especially in our support of the work of MCC, MEDA, CFGB, and all the other honorable acronyms. That is great and important work. It is central to who we are. And beyond this church, many of you are engaged in other food security endeavors, professionally and personally. That is all good. And there is more that we can do, especially as a church, especially in our local area. We've heard tons of ways to get involved this year through our partnership with the Saskatoon Food Bank and Learning Center. I'm hopeful that a lot of those volunteer opportunities will be opening up once again, once this wave of the pandemic recedes. Last week, Lisa Martins-Bartle shared a whole bunch more practical suggestions for sustainable, equitable, local food production and consumption. And if you've checked out any of the resources on our shared food security collection on Google Docs, there are action items in those resources all over the place. It's good stuff, practical stuff, and most of it is a whole lot easier and more sustainable than selling my house to start a church colony. And yet, I find it really hard to change. I can already see how this is going to play out. I'm going to make a modest attempt to change some of my habits over the next couple of months, but then I will get distracted and I'll drift back to my comfort zone and my comfort food. And then someone about June will mention the food bank project and I'll be like, oh yeah, I was going to do something about that. That's a pretty familiar pattern for me, as the best of intentions fail to materialize into significant changes. I suspect I'm not the only one who does that. So today I'm going to do some thinking out loud about why it might be hard to move from interest to action when it comes to this topic of food security. And then at the end, I'm going to throw out a bunch of ideas about how we might engage in this together as a church, and we'll see if we can work together to find a few next steps worth taking. A few thoughts on some of the complications that are already holding me back. One is shame and blame. Thinking about people going hungry while I have a wealth of food options at my fingertips makes me feel bad. I know that my all-dressed pizza, everything bagels, and chocolate hazelnut peanut butter pumpkin spice birthday cake Oreos, those come at a cost to others. I know that I don't do as much as I could. I know that I don't even care as much as I should. And I feel shame for that, especially around the Oreos, for lots of reasons. Now, maybe those feelings are accurate, maybe they're not. Either way, they're not particularly helpful. Shame and guilt are not good motivators of change. They make me want to avoid the topic. They put me on the defensive. So I was glad to come across this quote from Jewish theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel. What we see in the biblical prophets is that there's no limit to the concern one must feel for the suffering of human beings, that indifference to evil is worse than evil itself, that in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. Some are guilty, but all are responsible. I appreciate the distinction that Heschel makes between guilt and responsibility. This thing is not my fault, not all the way mine, and I still have agency here. I have power and a part to play. I am not evil. I'm not the source, and I'm not indifferent. I still feel the impact. I'm not the cause of suffering, and I'm still concerned about it. I don't bear the weight of someone else's hunger. I don't need to carry the guilt of that, and I can and should do something to lift that weight. I might not be guilty, but I am connected, and that gives me the opportunity to act responsibly. A second stumbling block for me is also about responsibility. I've been thinking a lot this week about who is responsible to provide food in the times when people are not able to provide food for themselves. As I see it, our society has three main answers to that question. On one end of the political spectrum, that responsibility falls to the government. A government provides for its people on behalf of its people, from financial benefits paid to families and individuals to subsidies and supports for agriculture and the food industry. Food security is a government priority in Canada. On the other end of the spectrum is the ideal of personal responsibility. You know the proverb, if you give someone a fish, they'll eat for a day, but if you teach someone to fish, you'll feed them for a lifetime. Our society believes in people. You have something to contribute. You have the capacity to learn and grow and make things better for yourself and for everyone. So let's invest in individuals, give them the tools and the responsibility to take care of themselves. And then third, in this space in between government responsibility and personal responsibility is what I'll call the responsibility of community. The work of providing food for people falls to the people who care enough to do something about it. That is the work of religious folks like us, and also secular nonprofits and NGOs. And I would also add in there the unstructured charity, like the simple acts of kindness of giving a few bucks or a sandwich to a panhandler on the street or your neighbor, that kind of thing. And I might even throw in there the growing interest in corporate responsibility, whether that's in the form of donations to community projects or investing in the well-being of employees through a living wage, etc. All of those levels are goodness. This is how we work out that thing that Heschel said about some are guilty and all are responsible. But the reason I list this as a stumbling block is that it's really easy to play these off against each other, to put the onus on someone else. Well, if the government would just fund this properly, well, that's really the way we have to solve this problem. Or, charity only can go so far. At some point, a person has to step up and provide for themselves. Some people got to learn the hard way. Or, well, we have to keep the government out of this. Nonprofits are way more efficient than government programs. All of those can be true statements, and they can also be convenient reasons to not get engaged myself, to put my own interests, my own ego first. And even with the best of intentions, some of us can get up in the politics of this, get caught up in the politics, trying to figure out, well, who should take responsibility and how do we get them to do it? And then end up not doing very much at all myself. The reality is that there's work to be done at all of these levels. All are responsible. And when I find myself saying they should do it, that's often about me trying to feel better about not doing it myself. A third thing getting in my way is about trying to find perfect solutions and leading with criticism. In the fall, a bunch of us from Wildwood spent a morning volunteering with the food bank at a warehouse, packing boxes of food that would be given to families in need as part of a Christmas hamper school program. We had a lot of fun. This was my first up-close engagement with the work of the food bank. Some of the staff were there and they were sharing details about their work, where the food came from, how it would be distributed, all of that. It was very interesting stuff. But for some reason, as we worked, I found myself being very critical. This sure is a lot of processed junk food in here. This isn't very healthy to give to people. We could work faster if we did it this way. I mean, if the staff would just do their part and let us organize it this way, then it would go better. Or, this process isn't very organized. The food putting into this box doesn't go together. How are people supposed to put a meal together with this random bunch of stuff? I would guess a lot of it doesn't even get eaten. Little things like that going through my head. It didn't stop me from appreciating the work that day, but I found that that's a pattern in a lot of my interactions with the food bank this year. Well, why are they doing it that way? Or that doesn't seem very efficient. I wonder if they thought of this. Or, well, if I was in charge, I would make this piece more of a priority. As though my 2-minute assessment of this work that they've been doing for 40 years has any validity. Why am I being critical of an organization doing good work to the best of their ability? I'm not saying we shouldn't critique nonprofits. Transparency and accountability is essential, but I'm a low-level volunteer. Why am I leading with criticism and analysis? Some of that is my habitual privilege as a straight white cis male. I've got opinions on everything. The world needs them. But mostly I think this is just a defensive reaction to the overwhelming weight of the work. There is so much to do. My resources seem inadequate for the task. Leading with criticism, playing the game of, well, that's not what I would do, that reinforces my self-image as a contributor and problem solver. Getting engaged in the work exposes my limitations. I can't actually solve this one. My contributions really won't change very much on their own. There aren't any perfect solutions. This is messy and humbling work. I expect that a shift from critic to learner, from analysis to curiosity would be more helpful. I don't know much about this work of food security. Frankly, the scale of the problem is intimidating, but I would like to learn and to help. So here I am, for better and for worse. That seems like a more realistic starting point. After all, the food bank asked me to move boxes, not to analyze their organizational strategy. So those are some of my stumbling blocks. Maybe something in there resonates with you as well. I find that naming them is helpful, although it doesn't make them go away. So then what is the way forward from here? Some of you know this simple description of healthy nutrition from In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan. 3 simple rules for eating. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Pollan says that we've overcomplicated nutrition to the point of paralyzing many people trying to find the right diet and the most sustainable food sources and all of that. Before long, a dense cloud bank of confusion moves in. Sooner or later, everything solid you thought you knew about the links between diet and health gets blown away in the gust of the latest study. For those of us who get lost in the weeds, Poland says his simple mantra captures almost everything you need to know. Eat food, real food, fresh, minimally processed stuff with only a few ingredients. Not too much. That's easier said than done, but pretty straightforward. And mostly plants. Meat isn't bad for most of us, but it is better for us and for the planet as a complement to a plant-based diet. That's it. Not a whole lot to argue with there, and easy to remember. So I wonder what a similar mantra towards collective food security might look like. I tried, but I couldn't get it down to 7 words. It does have 3 simple rules. Share food, not taking more than you need, starting where you live. Share food. Food is essential for everyone, for individuals, and for every level of community. Good nutrition is essential for physical health, for mental health, for productivity, for performance in school, for relationships, all of it. Our free market system uses food as a motivator. You're supposed to want to work hard to get food and to work harder for better food. But that is backwards. People who are malnourished cannot perform well. That's a whole complicated topic, but the research is clear. Withholding food and the living wages necessary to get good food, that perpetuates poverty. Food is essential. However we organize our society, sharing food with everyone should be at the center. Not taking more than you need. Food is meant to be shared, not hoarded. We commodify everything, but food resists that commodification. Food is perishable. It doesn't do nearly as well when it's scaled up, processed, and shipped around the world. Food is at its best when it is fresh. It's meant to be local, to be immediate, to go from farm to table, from the lake into the frying pan. As Lisa said last week, it can be more expensive to eat that way, but there's also a great cost to all the choice and convenience at our fingertips. That cost is not shared equally or fairly. There is all kinds of complexity in how food is shared. I'm not against the food industry making a profit, but hoarding and indulgence create huge amounts of waste and injustice, and that isn't helping anyone. Number 3, starting where you live. Do what you can where you are. Start small in whatever spheres of influence you're already in. Food security touches everything, so start with whatever is right in front of you. Find a 1% change, that small thing you can do, and commit to it for a while. See where that takes you. Share food, not taking more than you need, starting where you live. Buy the t-shirt at the merch table on your way out. That's how I put it. How would you say it differently for your own values? What would change if I take that mantra with me while I'm shopping? Maybe write it on one of my reusable grocery bags, put it on my refrigerator or by my stove. What would happen if our church committed to something like that in this year of partnership with the food bank? This church is where we live, so let's start right here. We've heard some great ideas already. I've thought of a few more. Community shared agriculture, CSA subscriptions for vegetables. That's purchasing food directly from local producers. Some of us do this already. Some of us find that hard to do. I wonder if as a church, what if we organized ways to share some of those CSAs with each other? Maybe we could partner up. My family can't use a whole box of vegetables, so maybe we could be matched up with another person in our family to share the cost and the produce. Or maybe we have people who come by the church periodically asking for food, and we have things in our freezer and our pantry that we give them. That's good, but what if we would purchase a CSA for the church so that we would have fresh vegetables to give away instead of or in addition to the Superstore gift cards and the processed food that we offer? Maybe we could, as a church, sponsor a cow or two through the Farmland Legacies organization that Lisa mentioned, raising beef that is distributed through food banks. Or some of you have cows, you grow food in that way. Maybe we could pay someone to raise a cow or two to be butchered and donated. Or maybe there are ways we can further invest in our land and facilities at the church for food production and education. What if we planted some fruit trees? Maybe we could invest in a greenhouse area to supplement our community garden. Or last week we talked about freezer space being an issue preventing some people from buying local beef. Maybe we could, as we said last week, purchase some freezers or find other ways to use our facilities to facilitate local food. Or as a church, we are very good at education. Maybe we could add food education to the things that we're already doing. I can imagine a future where church potlucks are possible again. Maybe we could do sustainable themes like we're gonna have a 100-mile potluck this time. Everybody brings something that's been grown and made within 100 miles of our location. Or show off your favorite plant-based recipe potlucks. A couple of years ago, we had a community kitchen idea going where we would gather together to cook, share recipes, make freezer food for ourselves and eat together. Maybe that was something we could pick up again. Or perhaps we could sponsor a plot in our community garden for our Sunday school children, give them a chance to plant and weed and harvest with a purpose. Or we're right down the street from Bishop Pocock and Wildwood elementary schools. I wonder if there are hungry kids at those schools. Maybe they already have some kind of food program that we could contribute to as a church. Or maybe one of those schools would have a class that would like to come and learn in our garden. Or maybe they'd like some volunteers to help them to start their own garden in the park. I don't know how these things work at schools, but I know that some of you do. Or maybe we could educate each other. Someone could lead a workshop on canning vegetables, or we could have sessions of adults cooking with children, or someone could teach us what to do with all those huge zucchinis that show up in our church every time the gardeners are giving them away at the end of the summer. As I said, we already do a lot of these kinds of things, and we have a lot of fun doing them. Any one of them would make a real impact. No doubt you have your own ideas as well. So I'm going to end today with an invitation. If any of that resonated with you, stick around after Zoom church today, if you can. We will open the breakout groups as usual for those who want informal conversation, but I'll just hang out in the main room with anybody who wants to stay there and brainstorm a bit further about how we might put any of these ideas into action or come up with some new ones. And I'll also invite for next week, we will be meeting in church in person for those of us who want to do that. And I'll again stick around after the church service next week, and we'll have some conversations, see if we can get ourselves organized with some next steps to put something into action. So it won't be a long meeting next week, but if you'd like to stay for 15 minutes or so to share some ideas, see who else might be interested in collaborating, that's one way that we'll do that. And if neither of those opportunities works for you, if you have ideas that you'd like to send me, or you just want to stay up to date on what other people are talking about, just send me an email, give me a call, and I will keep you posted. Let's pray together. God, our provider, giver of all good things, we are so grateful for good food to eat. We are grateful for this land to share. We are grateful for good health when we have it, and for healing and compassion when we don't. We are grateful for the communities of which we are a part, and for the opportunities to give and to share. You are all we have. You give us what we need. Our lives are in your hands, O God. Our lives are in your hands. Amen.